Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to Dude, I Love That. I'm Liv, and today we're continuing on with Laguna Beach and doing the season 2 cast, which if you heard the last episode, season 2 is my favorite. And we're talking about my girl Kristin, who I love so much. She's my favorite main character they had. And I want to touch on this again just before we fully jump in. There's a ton to cover, but this is really important. So remember, we're seeing situations in the show that have been produced and edited to sell a certain storyline. Okay. So these people may not be what we see on the screen. They may be completely different, or there may have been things that were taken out of context, or they may have been edited to look a certain way or embody a certain character type, right? So let's keep that in mind as we type these characters for fun. This is just what I've been able to see based on the season or 2 seasons that we got to really see them develop. And I'm just kind of throwing out there what their likely Enneagram type would be based on situations that we saw. So please don't take this too seriously. This is a lighthearted episode. And again, we're going to start with Kristin. So I've really never seen someone that embodies an 8-wing 7 like Kristin Cavallari. And I know I kind of said this about Lauren when I talked about her. There's a lot that I think I've been able to see over the years. Like I still follow her on Instagram. And so there's things that I might be pulling from after Laguna Beach. But again, if this is her personality, it's her personality. So I really did choose that 8-wing 7 for her because she embodies the challenger personality type. So if you don't know, if you're new to the Enneagram, the 8 is called the challenger. And I really think the only wing we could say for her is an 8-wing 7, because again, the 7 is like the adventurer. They're enthusiastic and they're always looking for a fun, good time. And we see Kristin doing that throughout the series. And she very much doesn't want to be somewhere where things aren't fun and where she can't have the control like the 8 wants. And so that's something where she kind of like stays in her comfort zone in a way, because she always has her friends around her, right? She like wants to bring them with her. She's like, hey, we're going to go out and do this or whatever. I love in season 2, they're like going to Dave and Buster's and they're just always looking for a good time. So that's why I chose that 7-wing for her. But you know, Kristin's just bold. She always speaks what's on her mind, and whether or not someone likes it, she doesn't really care. She's just like, look, this is the truth and you can get with it or get over it. And honestly, I seriously respect that. There's so much of her that I'm like, we need a little bit more of that. But of course, it can always go too far too. And sometimes you end up saying things or doing things that you regret because in the moment you were gung ho on it, right? Because you're in that gut triad as an 8. And so sometimes you're like, this is the way, we need to do this now. We need to act on it. But there's also some merit in taking time to think through things before you do them. And of course, as a teenager, you're usually just like throwing caution to the wind and you just go for it. So definitely a little bit of that too. But as a gut type, she's going for it. And especially with that 7-wing, she's going to be even more, hey, let's just go for it than an 8-wing 9, who might be a little bit more contemplative and a little more reserved. Some other things that, in my opinion, really solidify her being an 8. She does not need approval from anyone. She's like, if I want to do it, I'm going to do it. And that's something that, you know, a lot of people, they have to grow into that. They have to grow into understanding what they like, what they don't like, and what they want to pursue. But Kristin's kind of always known. And that's something that the 8 is so lucky to have, because there's not a lot that they need feedback for. You know, if they know it, they know it. And they're going to just trial by fire, if that makes sense. So they're going to go for it, see if it works. If it doesn't, no big deal. They'll move on to something else. And that's something that I think even when we see in her immediate friend group, the people that she's friends with aren't so much that way. And that's why she rose to be kind of the leader of the group, because she's the one that's able to call the shots and she's actually confident in what she's saying, versus other times, especially as a teenager, you want to fit in, you want to be in the scene, and you know, you're going to make your decisions based off of that. And instead, Kristin's like, I don't care, I've already made the decision, and if you like it, that's fine. But if not, like I said, she's going to go for it anyway. And I honestly think that's something that Alex and Jessica really value about her. And speaking of Alex, let's go ahead and talk about Alex H. And there's so many Alexes and Laurens and everybody else. So I am talking about Alex H, the blonde who's best friends with Kristin. And I typed her as a 9-wing 8. And I kind of always knew that she was a 9. I just wasn't super sure of her wing. And then, of course, like I said, I've seen this show so many times. And I recently watched Whitney Port and her husband Tim's reaction videos to Laguna Beach, which if you have not seen that, you absolutely must. It's so funny. And it honestly just like takes the show up another level to me. So I don't know, check it out on her YouTube channel. But through watching that, I really got to see that the reason I think Alex and Kristin get along so well, of course, 9s can get along with almost anybody. They're really good at just melding, and because they're not like super opinionated and they don't come guns a-blazing, they can kind of just get along and fit in with any friend group. However, the difference, and I'll talk about Alex versus Jessica in a minute, but the difference with Alex H is that I think she has an 8 wing, and that's why sometimes she's able to really like joke around with Kristin and kind of beat her at her own game in a way. Like Kristin will say something and then she'll come right back and say something else. And in a sense, you're like, oh no, she would never. And then you hear her and you're like, whoa, oh my gosh, that was hilarious and so quick-witted. And I think people tend to forget nines are extremely witty. And that's something that I think is a really good balance in the friendship with Kristin, because a lot of times she could tend to overpower other personality types because eights, again, big personalities. The thing with Alex is, I think because she does have an 8 wing, she's actually able to play off that really well. And she's able to put her opinions out there and she doesn't really fear it either. Like she and Kristin are very much on the same wavelength. And I think if she was maybe a 9 wing 1, there would be a little bit more of a problem because the 1 is so justice oriented and wants to do what's right and good, whereas the 9 wing 8 is a little bit more like, yeah, I want the piece of the 9, but I also am going to challenge a little bit like my 8. And so I think she goes back and forth really well. And even though she is calm and collected and very stable, I think she does show up with that 8 humor and the 8 bite. And then of course Jessica. So I actually had to do a tri-type for because I think it's very important for her. Okay, so I typed her as a 296, and she was a tough cookie for me. I really did go back and forth between all those types, figuring out what is her core type. And originally, I always thought 9. And then when I did start looking at the series more for this episode, I'm like, if I compare her to Alex, who I believe is a true 9, she's not very 9ish. And then I think I realized that she's probably a 6 or like a self-preserving 6, because the self-preserving 6 looks very similar to a 2. And she felt very reactive to me. She's always worried and kind of like in that paranoid state that the 6 can get to when they're in lower health levels. And then I started to see that I think it was more situational, not so much a constant personality type, if that makes sense. And so then from there, I landed on her being a 2. And I think we see this a lot in her relationships, even when she's with Jason. I mean, she's very much focused on love. She wants a relationship that she can count on. And it's really important to her to have people around her that she can pour into and that pour into her. And I think that can tend to leave the 2 in situations that aren't good for them longer than they should be, because they want to stick it out. They want to be there for that person. And that can look very similar to the loyalty of a 6 and also the loyalty of a 9. All those types are very loyal. And so it can be hard for them to leave situations that aren't good for them. Now, the interesting thing with Jessica is, and this is kind of how I ended up ruling out that I think she's a 6. When she's at the wave situation, I think they like went down to San Diego, and it was her and Taylor and not Jessica, and Alex M. And they were all talking and they're like, Kristin kissed Jeff, and like, what do you think about that? And blah, blah, blah. And she's so mean to you. And I think we kind of started to see some of her true feelings come out. And that's what you'll see more with a 2 versus a 6. The 6 is going to kind of keep it on the DL and not necessarily say what they think right away. Whereas the 2, she was kind of like, yeah, you know what? Like, I'm finally getting people that are pumping me up and that are saying, hey, something's not right here. And it confirms for her that, yeah, maybe that wasn't the best. And I did let it slide. And then she was able to rise up and be like, you know what? Yeah, that wasn't right. And it did bum me out. But they were telling her, hey, you can recover from this. He really likes you. You need to go for it. And you know what? She did. And she was really happy with it. And so that's where I think we do see the difference with her not being a 9 or a 6, because the reaction there would have been different. The 2, she kind of pulled from some of that 8, because remember, 2 goes to 8 in stress. She pulled from some of that, and some of the anger came out. And that's not something you would see as much from a 6 or a 9. Another thing to me that really solidified her being a 296 was the fact that she has so much self-doubt. And of course, that's something that 2s, 9s, and 6s all struggle with, because they're all kind of, in a weird way, people please and keep the peace at times, especially when they're in group situations, because there's so many different dynamics and personality types at play. The 2s, 9s, and 6s kind of want to sink in and just like be. They want to meld with a group, which is great, but it can also leave you in a really precarious position because as a six myself, you're like, how much of my personality can I let shine here? Should I let other people take the lead? Should I not? I don't know. And I think we see that a lot in her relationship with Jason. Of course, we see it in her friendship with Kristin and Alex. And so we see her do this thing of blaming herself when things go wrong. And that, of course, increases the self-doubt. And so I think she's on a little bit of this hamster wheel, and it can be tough to get off that, especially when you do have the loyalty of a six and the peacemaker of a nine. And so I think we see her grow more and more as time goes on, where she develops a little bit more of her sense of what's right for me, what's not right. And I would love to know how she's doing now. I'd love to know like what the growth looked like for her as she got older, because of course, when you get older, you start to learn your boundaries. You start to learn what works for you and what doesn't, because you've had more time for the trial and error process. And that's something that as a teen, you haven't really gone through yet. And so there's a lot of grace there being a teen. But if you are prone to people pleasing and staying in bad situations too long, it can get dangerous. And that's something, of course, when we found out that Jason was abusing drugs and alcohol, you start to go, oh my gosh, thank God Jessica got out, because that could have gotten really bad. And really quickly to just touch on why I chose a six for her tri-type. She tends to be very doubting of people. You see her ask Jason all the time, are you lying to me? Are you telling me the truth? Where were you? And obviously, there are situations that have happened that have caused her to be like, I can't just take him at his word. Or maybe there's even been other situations prior to Jason where she's learned people lie to me and I can't just take it. So I have to get to the bottom of it. And so I think we see that process of elimination for her as a six, trying to see, can I poke holes in your theory? And that's something you'll see sixes do a lot. They want to test the people close to them to see, can I actually trust you, or do I need to keep my guard up? Speaking of sixes, I want to talk about Talon super quick. Anyone who knows me and knows that I love this show knows that I love Talon. He's just like precious. But I actually gave him the same tri-type I gave Jessica, just switched around a little bit. So I ended up doing a 6-2-9 for him. And the reason for that is because he is so loyal and so caring about his friendships and his relationships. And he also has a little bit of that 9 where he's like, I don't know what I want. And he also has the bit of a 2 where he's like, I just want love. Like, I just want to be happy and have this sort of happily ever after situation. Now, again, I don't know if that's actually how he is in real life, but that's what we saw edited together for the show. And so, we see, kind of reading between the lines, that he and Kristin have had this on again, off again relationship. And even though Kristin admits that she kind of treats him like crap, he still stays with her and he's still always there for her, which, I mean, props to him. Like, that is so above and beyond, and I could never. But he always is there for the people around him. And again, like I said with Jessica, that can be a good thing and it can also be a bad thing. So that's something that as a 6 myself, I've had to watch out for, because you don't want people crossing boundaries in your life, but you also don't want to be so shut off that you're not there for people. And I think that's sort of the journey that we see him take throughout season 2. And, he does come off very 2-ish. He does come off very sweet and caring and lovey-dovey. And I think we saw that a lot in how he was able to talk to Taylor. I don't know if there's a lot of types that would be able to have the conversation that he had with her. And now, again, maybe that was scripted, maybe that wasn't even him. But like I said, we're just going off of what we can see. And so, he is telling her, like, I compare all these other girls to you. I've always wanted to be with you, but I just felt like there's no way. And it felt very genuine. I didn't feel like he was BSing her at all. And so for me, I take that and I'm like, that feels like the heart of a 2. They want that love. They want that connection. And of course, as a 6 too, they want to kind of, like I said, lay their cards out on the table and test how the other person reacts. And then the other thing that goes along with that in terms of relationship is he does seem to have a hard time choosing what he actually wants. And that's why I ended up choosing that 9 for him, because I think a lot of the decisions he makes comes out of wanting peace. And, that again is sort of a blessing and a curse, because it can leave you a lot in this state of limbo. And I think that's what we see with him in his relationships. He obviously wants Taylor, but there was clearly something that happened behind the scenes that wasn't really working out because of probably someone else. Because I think in Whitney and Tim's channel comments section, someone was saying that Taylor had a boyfriend at the time or was like maybe seeing someone. And so Talon felt like there's no way. And so then he backed off. But with that 9, he would back off because he'd be like, I don't want to cause drama or I don't want to get rejected. And so, of course, rejection kind of plays into the whole 692 situation because everybody has a fear of rejection, like, period. But those types do tend to be like, you know what, I'm going to really reel it back because I don't want to put everything out there and deal with rejection. And the other thing that I think people tend to forget about 6s, we have very complex emotions. There's a lot of duality with 6s. There's a bit of an aggressiveness, but also a lot of passiveness. There's a little bit of like this paranoia, but also wanting to overlook things to try and keep their peace, which can come off very 9ish. And so I think we do see a lot of that with him. And especially you kind of see he's got like this punk rock skater style, but he's like just the ooey gooeyest little center of a person. And so again, I think that's like the perfect showcasing of what a 6 is like. Oh, you know what? Really quickly, I forgot to say what I think his subtype is. So I did choose a 6, obviously, for his core type, but I think he's probably a self-preserving 6. And the self-preserving 6, like I said with Jessica, when I was trying to go through her type, the self-preserving 6 looks a lot like a type 2. And sometimes they can actually mistype for a 2. So if you've ever had that happen and you've maybe typed as a 2 and you're like, this doesn't really feel like me, check into a self-preserving 6 because you might find your type there. And as always, I say this at the end of every episode, but if you're curious about your type and you want to know what the heck am I, what are my core desires, my core fears, what are my passions, everything to do with your type, check out my website. I offer Enneagram life coaching, and it's different than regular life coaching because it really does focus on your personality type and how that plays into your career, personal life, family, all that good stuff. So check it out. But let's go ahead and move on to Alex M. Now, she was a tricky one for me because I feel like she wasn't like super obvious to me for her type. And really the only thing I could get a handle on was that she's a 3. And I think she's probably a 3-wing too. And I say that because obviously she's very performer oriented. We can see that she sings a lot. And I do think she fits with that kind of performing 3 aspect. However, now, this isn't going to sound the most complimentary of 3, so please do not take this too seriously. This is just me kind of putting puzzle pieces together. The fact that she was so brazen to pursue Jason and, whatnot, have a crush on him and openly say that she had a crush on him while he was with Jessica, 3s do deal with deceit. And that's something where she kind of was low key hitting on Jason, trying to flirt with him, trying to get with him, and even kept him as her formal date after he was dating Jessica. That's just something that is kind of in that deceit category. And that does happen to 3s when they're in, mid to lower levels of health. Of course, any type can have issues at the mid and lower levels of health because we're all human. We all go through things. But I'm just saying that in particular kind of clued me into maybe there's more beyond just the performing aspect that would make her 3. And of course, she has great qualities of a 3 too. She's very loyal to her friends. There was a situation where Kristin and Alex H are having their little fiesta, which I assume was Cinco de Mayo. And when she found out that her friend Morgan, now this is Morgan S. Oh my God, wait, were they both Morgan S? Because there's a Morgan in season 1. I'm talking about blonde Morgan from season 2. When she found out that it was like Morgan could come to the party, but everybody else isn't invited, she's like, what the heck? That's terrible, because why would they put you in that position, Morgan? Because you're my friend and I care about you, and that's not right. And so obviously she always sticks up for her friends. And we even saw, back to the whole fake wave that they were going to go to in San Diego in season 2, when she found out that Kristin kissed Jeff and Kristin knew that Jessica liked Jeff, this is so many people at one time, she's like, hey, that's not right. She shouldn't be doing that. That's your friend. Even though she did the exact same thing to Jessica, she still was like, hey, loyalty. Hello, what's your problem? That's your best friend. Like, why would she do that to you? I think another thing that people don't know so much about 3s is that they're very good at confronting people. And obviously, we all know the infamous confrontation that happened between her and Jessica in Cabo. And that was crazy sauce. Okay. It was nuts, really intense. Obviously, there were other substances at play that might have egged on the confrontation, but she came like a freaking sword, man. She just knew exactly which buttons to push. She just cut right through all the crap and was like, hey, you did this, tell me why. And that's something that threes are really great at. And like, if you have to go into the courtroom, oh my gosh, you want a three as a lawyer for sure. A three or an eight, they're going to just slice and dice and you'll be good. But threes are really good at getting to the point and being like, tell me why you did this because I want to know. And especially if it involves a friend, the loyalty comes out and it's just a slam dunk. And like I said, I chose a two wing for her because I think she does have a little bit of that to her. I think she does have more care than another three I'll talk about later. But I think she really does love those around her and she wants to be there for her friends and she does want to be kind and caring to them. And speaking of Alex's friends, let's go ahead and talk about Taylor, who I love, but I feel like I didn't get a whole lot of screen time for her to actually be able to see what is her type. And some of the only things I could really pull out were that she is kind of even keeled, but if she feels something, she's going to say it. And even though she is more reactive, she didn't seem so much to me like a four or an eight, which are two types in the reactive triad. And so I was left with only one more type that it could be, which is a type six. And it actually made a lot of sense for me because I felt like, you know what? Yeah, she could be a counterphobic six. And if you've never heard me talk about a counterphobic six, you have to check out the Divergent episode and the Top Gun episode because I do major deep dives into a counterphobic six in those episodes. But long story short, the counterphobic six, because obviously we talked about Talon, who is a quote regular six, where it's the six that you automatically think of or the characteristics of a six that you likely hear. However, the counterphobic six is different. They actually push towards fear. So instead of running away from the fear, they want to face it and be like, hey, you're irritating me. Let's deal with this head on instead of feeling like, oh my gosh, I have to run from this thing. And, you know, one of the other hallmark things about a counterphobic six is that they are more likely to tell you what's on their mind than a self-preserving or a social six, because those sixes are going to more likely figure out what's the appropriate thing to say or what is the group saying and then kind of stick with that. Whereas the counterphobic six, you're going to see a little bit more of that eightness where they're going to be like, no, that's not right. Or you shouldn't have said that because that really hurt her feelings and whatever. And so we see her do things like that. And even in the situation where they weren't invited to the Cinco de Mayo party, again, I'm assuming it was Cinco de Mayo. I don't know. Why would you just have like a random fiesta party? That kind of seems weird. And I think it was like around May. So I'm going to assume it was Cinco de Mayo, but that is besides the point. All I'm saying is she was quick to be like, that's not right. You can't do that. You need to either invite all of us or don't invite us at all. And again, you know, when they're at the wave, she's quick to tell Jessica, you have so much more to offer. Why are you not seeing it? Like, you need to see yourself the way that other people see you and stop playing this blame game with yourself, basically. And so she's quick to call out things like that. And she has a little bit of that eightness because the counterphobic six does look very similar on the outside to an eight. And so I think we see that with her. But long story short, I think she has more of the six qualities than the eight qualities. And, you know, she's very loyal, like with the other sixes and the three that we talked about. However, with her, you can tell, and she's still friends with the same people to this day, which I think is incredible. And that's what you'll see from a six. If they find people that they connect with and that they feel they can be their true self with, they're going to be with you till the end. They are ride or die people. And then lastly, you know, she doesn't want people jerking her around. And that's something you'll see from a counterphobic six, whereas the self-preserving six and the social six might deal with it a little bit longer to like see if things work out. The counterphobic six is going to be like, no, sir, I'm not staying another minute. You're crossing a boundary or you've lied to me or whatever. And they're just going to cut you off. And that's something that you do see in her relationship with Talon. She confronts them and is like, either you want to be with me or you don't. So make a move or I'm leaving. And obviously we see how that worked out. And then two more people. Let's talk about Jason. Oh dear, Jason. So obviously, let's just preface this with he was dealing with a drug and alcohol addiction at the time, and that may have influenced the way that he acted. I just want to put that out there. Now, the type that I chose for him based on the actions that I was able to see from the series is that he's probably a three-wing four. Now, another thing, he's in very low health levels. He's obviously not doing well. And so that's causing a lot of his actions. Again, remember I talked about threes in low health levels deal with a lot of deceit. And that's something that we see with his relationship, or I guess love triangle between him, Jessica, and Alex M. He tends to always kind of be wearing a mask. You know, threes are known for that because they're like chameleons. They're really able to meld with whatever other people expect them to be or what they feel like they need to be in a certain situation to get a desired outcome. or in order to not disrupt things. And so, especially in those lower health levels, they're almost never their true self because there's so many layers of masks and the deceit. And so it can get really tricky to know, who am I actually dealing with here? And of course, when there are substances involved, you're never going to necessarily be acting out of your true desires because there's other things altering your decisions. And so I want to give him a lot of grace for that. And that's why I'm bringing it up so much, because obviously he's doing so well now and he's really happy and he's free from those things, which is incredible. And I'm just so happy for him. But it obviously caused a lot of problems in the show and in his personal life behind the scenes. So that's why I think there's so many layers to him. But I did decide to give him a 4 wing because, in a sense, he kind of feels a little bit like that lower health level 4 that feels like rules don't apply to me. I can toy with people in order to get what I want, which is something that you'll see from the very low health level of a 3 and a 4. And, he's just very, very charming. And that's something that you'll see from 3s. They're very much a charmer. And that's how, if you know the show White Collar, Neil Caffrey is definitely a 3. He's able to put on this smile and say the right words and do the right things. And that's why people fall in love with him. And that's sort of what we see with Jason. No one's really able to give an answer for why they love Jason. They just do. And if there's nothing that's necessarily happening, it's just this vibe you're getting from somebody, it's likely the charm of a 3. And then let's talk about Jason's BFF, Cedric. I freaking love Cedric, and I wish we would have seen more of him. He literally cracks me up. I think he's fantastic. And what really just gave me the aha moment of what his type was is in the graduation episode. He's like, dude, I think I'm just like gonna go in my underwear, and I'm gonna wear my gown, and I'm gonna wear socks with like loafers, and then when I get my diploma, I'm gonna raise my hands and my gown will come up and it'll just be my underwear. I was like, what is this guy doing? He's so ridiculous. And he just, the entire series is like, I want to be having fun. Let's like find a way to make this interesting because life's boring and I need to have more fun. And that's why I typed him as a 7 wing 8. The dude is obviously the life of the party. And this is the funny thing about 7s. They're cool with being the sidekick because, let's be honest, you have way more fun as a sidekick than you do as a main character. And I think we see that time and time again in every kind of like pop culture reference. But Cedric is like the ultimate wingman sidekick, and he's there to be bold and himself. And the funny thing is, in the episode where they're going to prom, there's that scene between him and Alex M where he's like getting the front of his hair permed because it's not straight in the front. And he has no shame about it. He's like, look, your man needs some beauty treatments and it just is what it is. And that's where you see the freedom of the 7. They're just like, I'm out here doing my thing and nothing's going to stop me from having a great time. Again, like I said, we don't have a ton of scenes with Cedric and it rips me open inside, but it just is what it is. It's too late now. So I do hope that we get to see more of him at some point. I don't know what he's doing with his life right now, probably something fantastic, but he's probably still embracing that 7 wing 8 vibe and killing it. And that's all that I have for these characters. There's other people that we could have talked about, but this episode would have been extremely long. So anyways, I really hope that you enjoyed, and be sure and check out Whitney and Tim's channel if you want to see the whole reaction series. Again, thank you so much for watching. Be sure and follow along on Instagram. I always post fun behind the scenes, kind of like what I call a vibe post for each episode. And you can find that over on the Dude I Love That Instagram, which is literally just at Dude I Love That Podcast. And then you can also find me if you're interested in more Enneagram content on at Hey It's Liv James. Also, be sure and check back for a brand new episode on Friday. We have new episodes every Tuesday and Friday, and I post all that good stuff on Instagram, so you'll always know when a new ep is coming out. Again, thanks so much, and I'll see you next time. Bye.